Dan Burke, 8/23, August 23rd, 1947. I was born in the hospital in Boone, but Madrid's always been my home. So we were right on the edge of town. My backyard was a cornfield. The rest of the town was, Madrid, as big as it is, was the town. So several things stand out in my mind. If you were a boy in Madrid, growing up in Madrid, in the 50s, when James Dean and, the motorcycle jackets were popular and everything, and everybody, there was kind of a pecking order. If you were a male, you had to occasionally get into a fight just to see where you were on the pecking order. So that's kind of how it was. It was very much, most of the guys I knew were very much into cars. I bought my first one when I was 14, for instance. Dad never thought I could get it going, but I'd been watching him. He was a mechanic, and I was a pretty good mechanic, and it didn't have an intake manifold or a carburetor on it when I bought it, but it was in a junkyard, and I was able to pick and choose from other cars and built my own. I drove it home, because I'd asked him when I could drive it, and he said, as soon as you get it running, because he didn't think I'd get it running. So I drove it home. He reneged. I had a learner's permit, but I couldn't get a farm permit because I was too close to school. We were a mile from school. And so it was pretty much, I was mostly into making things go fast. That's why I was in track. I liked to go fast. I was a miler for Madrid High School. During my high school days, I started actually playing hooky quite a bit. One of the other ones that got expelled was how I got into the Navy in kind of a strange way. He came by, that was in October we got expelled, and he came by and said he was going to go to Des Moines and join the Marines. I was 17, and I figured, oh, what the heck, at this point. So I went with him to go join the Marines. The Marine recruiter wasn't there, but the Navy recruiter was. And he talked us into joining the Navy. Then I had to go get my father's permission and sign the paperwork and everything, since I was only 17. So that was January 19th. On the 22nd of January 1965, I became a member of the United States Navy. We got on a train, my first train ride. Well, I won't say my first train ride. There had been a train that ran from Madrid to Des Moines when I was young that we used to ride. But this was my first cross-country sleeper coach, Skyliner trip to San Diego from Des Moines, Iowa. And the guy I joined the Navy with, and I'm not going to use names, but he and I went into boot camp together in San Diego. About halfway through boot camp, three things occurred. One, he got set back to the day one, first week, first day, because he failed a bunch of the test. The battery test I took, when they took me into it, I wanted to be a jet mechanic, and the testing turned out that I was going to be an electronics technician. So, and a friend of mine in the boot camp was, his father owned a TV radio repair station, and he became a jet mechanic. So, go figure. But anyhow, the other thing that happened was they let us have a radio early, because normally you don't get a radio till toward the end of boot camp. But they let our barracks have a radio. And it was the president announcing something about a place called Indochina, and we were going to go there, and the draft was going to start and everything. So that's also the time when they started doing what they called pilot programs. Ours was the last company, I think, to go through boot camp for the full term, the 3-month term. After that, it was half that long. After boot camp, I got my orders, and it was to the Naval Air Station in Memphis, Tennessee, Aviation Electronics School. So I went to Memphis. Well, in between, I came home and went to my senior prom right after boot camp and before Memphis. So in Memphis, Tennessee, that program was cut from 32 weeks to something like 16 weeks in this pilot program thing. And they added in computer theory, because computers were a new thing in 1965. And they decided, since those of us who were in the radar group, and everybody knows radar is pulses, and computers are pulses. They're totally different animals, but that was the intelligence level of the military intelligence. Yes. So I became an aviation electronics technician for radar, and also with the computer theory. From there, came home on leave again briefly, and then got assigned to an airborne early warning squadron, VAW-11, in San Diego, California, North Island, in Detachment Delta. We were the first squadron on the West Coast to have the new E-2 aircraft. And so we became the first squadron to actually operate the E-2 aircrafts off the West Coast. We got put on board the USS Constellation, CBA-64, and left San Diego in the spring of, must have been 66. Stopped in Hawaii, and on leaving Hawaii, the first thing that I found exciting about going towards Westpac was the Russians would always send a Bison or a Bear aircraft to take pictures of the aircraft carriers as they left Pearl Harbor, and sure enough, they did. And our A7s, was the A7s? The Vigilantes, anyway. The Bison or the Bear would be coming over to take photographs, and the big A7 would be right under them, blocking their view, camera view. That was always an interesting thing to watch. And then we went to Yokohama, Japan, where we would meet up with our sister ship, the Kitty Hawk. And we'd transfer material from the Kitty Hawk to the Constellation. Kitty Hawk would come home, and we would go to Vietnam. My typical day on the Connie, we kept the E-2s. We were the first planes to take off and the last planes to land in any sortie. Our targets were Hanoi, Haiphong, the Ho Chi Minh Trail. Everything was north of the DMZ. My job on the carrier basically was to keep the aircraft running, the E-2s. There was a group of us, and we had air-conditioned, highly air-conditioned labs down on the flight deck level, or the hangar bay level, where the computer lab, diagnostic equipment was all computerized on one side of the hallway, and the circuit board repair and electronic repair was on the other side. We all had top secret clearances because we were working with the ECMs, we were working with the secret digital navigation equipment, digital communications equipment. The radar itself was secret. And I still don't know if I can talk about some of its capabilities, so I won't. I usually worked the night shift. Most of the time we'd be launching during daylight and repairing at night. So we usually worked at night, which meant we got breakfast for dinner and dinner for breakfast and lunch. So I was working on the flight deck. We had an E-2 getting ready to launch. It was kind of on the elevator getting ready to go to cat. I don't know how they were, I don't remember how they were numbered, but it would be the right-hand cat on the foredeck. And there was a Phantom getting ready to take off, and the shield was already up, you know, the blast shield behind the catapult. There's a section of the deck that raises up, and the exhaust hits that and is blasted upward. Well, the CAT crew and everybody is forward of the blast shield and off to the sides. And I had come out and was coming up from the shop. I'd come up the ladder. I had a piece of equipment that I had to install in the aircraft. And it was sitting there getting close to takeoff time. It was going to replace the one that was coming in for a landing. And when the Phantom launched, it had the 2,000-pound belly tank, fuel tank underneath. And it ruptured just before the end of the catapult. And the afterburner, of course, set that ruptured fuel on fire. And this fireball came down the deck. I had on my earphones, and you were supposed to wear a helmet and goggles, and had on my flight deck shirt, which was long-sleeved. And I lost my eyebrows, and I lost part of the front of my hair, and where whatever wasn't covered, you know, got the hair on the back of my hands, although I had a glove on one hand and not the other for some reason, but and it knocked me down with the radio landing on me. It was an ARC 47 radio, I think it was, I was carrying. The thing that stands out in my mind is that I was breathing out when it hit, and 14 guys around me were breathing in, and they all died. And I was right in the middle of all that. And the only reason I didn't was because I was breathing out when it hit. And those of us, there were like 20 of us in the area. The ones that were breathing out were okay. The ones that were breathing in were not. They breathed in the burning jet fuel. Yeah, so it was not a good welcome home. No one got a nice welcome home. It was, you got out of your uniform as soon as you could, you know, because of the abuse, basically. And that stuck with some guys really pretty bad. I was in a group of people in Austin, Texas, called the Coming Home Group. And some of them were still very upset. I mean, this is like in 1990. And I was really disappointed. I guess that's the best way I can put it. Just, and betrayed, you know. One of my first jobs when I got out of the service was working on the NICEX Safeguard and Sentinel, or Sentinel on Safeguard missile system projects. And I was working in New Jersey for a company called Bolin and Boyce. I moved to New Jersey and went to school out there, and eventually got a degree in engineering, and so ended up, well, I moved back to Iowa in '74. Headhunter called me, wanted to know if I wanted to work for a company called Fisher Controls. They needed a technical writer, and that's what I had done for Bell Labs. And so I was a technical writer for Fisher Controls for quite a while. Ran my own company down there for a while, Barbara and I did. And moved back to Iowa to be close to family. My mother had just passed. And worked at a greenhouse for a while, worked for the USDA as a facility manager and laboratory in Ames, and then retired. I retired from the USDA, and now I'm working again. I'm the executive director of the Heartland chapter of the Scleroderma Foundation, which is a nonprofit. Support education and research function for scleroderma, which is a rare disease. If I had to do it over again, I would still do that. I would avoid certain people and places afterwards.